this meeting. Usually our rule of thumb is working group documents beat documents that are not working group documents. And so we let the working group documents expand time and don't call time because we usually have a bunch of individual documents. Now that most of our documents are working group documents, we can't follow that rule.
No, well, we can, but it won't help.
Yeah, exactly. All right, I think it's 4 o'clock, so we should start.
Okay, let's go ahead and get going. Welcome to SUIT at IETF 114. By Thursday, you probably know the note well already, but this is the rights, privileges, and responsibilities as participants. Please follow the code of conduct and treat each other with respect. In addition, you need to wear a mask in this room unless you're on the pink X here by the presenter's mic. And we just did the administrative tasks, so I'm going to skip that. So the agenda, we have a long agenda today for, it seemed like 2 weeks ago we were not going to have any presentations, and now we have 9. So this is the first page of the draft agenda, and here's the second page. Any bashes to that agenda? It's the same one that's posted. Okay, with no bashes, we'll get into the first one. It's the hackathon report.
Okay, yeah. All right, SUIT hackathon report. Is this thing on? Otherwise, hand me their mic. Can you hear anything? No? Hand me the other.
Flip the switch.
Flip the switch. It is on. All right. 1, 2, 3. Now it's on. All right, great. All right, hackathon report. We had a combined COSE SUIT TEEP hackathon table with a bunch of participants listed there. I'm going to go through this pretty quickly until we get to the 2 issues to report on. Go ahead, next slide. There was a bunch of issues that were filed during the hackathon. The whole set on the top I am not going to talk about because they're trivial grammar stuff and are pressed for time, so I'll only mention the bottom 2. The bottom 2, I have a slide on each of them, so that means only real 2 slides of content. So first one, so if you have issues, go and read through those. All right. First question that we had at the TEEP hackathon was, it came up as far as TEEP trying to implement the SUIT manifest. Okay. So the EAT profile previously used software name and software version claims, but we observed that those were meant for human readable strings. Okay. They were not necessarily machine readable. So for example, there was nothing to prevent somebody from patching a binary and then just not updating the human readable string, right? So it wasn't, cryptographically, bound to anything. So that's the wrong thing. And so Lawrence said, you probably want to use the manifest claim. So that's what we did in TEEP, okay? The only issue with that is that currently the manifests claim requires a full SUIT manifest, right? So manifest format allows you to have a SUIT envelope. And we said we would like to be able to do that without having the entire SUIT manifest. And is there a way to do that? So that was the question raised, and we filed this issue for that. It says, okay, for the manifest format, we've got a content type. As long as you have something to fill into a content type, that means it's a reference. You could do it even without a SUIT envelope, right? You could do something other than the SUIT envelope. So example, during the hackathon, here was a proposal that was submitted as a pull request to say, okay, alternate version of the manifest body is not a SUIT envelope, it's a SUIT reference, which has like a URI and a manifest sequence number. And Brendan was online, and we went back and forth and said, this kind of thing might make sense, okay? And so right now, the proposal is to maybe add this to the update management, which is on the agenda later. And of course, this would require a COAP content format value to mean that's the format. Second issue that came up, and so by the way, if we want to defer discussion on that to the update management document, we could do that. But that was one thing we filed, one issue that we ran into in implementing. And so we filed the issue and say we should really discuss as a part of that document. Second issue that we ran into was having a SUIT parameter for the manifest sequence number. So the TEEP query response has now, and this is now in draft 10, has system property claims. Although in TEEP there was a question about whether this is right, but this is what draft 10 says. And so in the SUIT report and now in the TEEP query response, you can have this little blob of system property claims, which has a SUIT component identifier and 1 or more SUIT parameters. And there's parameters defined in one of the documents that covers things like image digest, size, and so on, but there's nothing that has the manifest sequence number to put in there. Right, so the manifest document allows you to have suit manifests, suit parameters. I think it's the update management one that augments that with additional suit parameters. And this is just saying, hey, let's add yet another suit parameter that's possible here and put that into the extensions document, just like we've put image digest and so on into there. And so that's the proposal here. Option number one is to make that be type specific. Option number two is to make it not be suit type specific, so that other protocols, if they have the same problem, could reuse option two. So my personal preference is option two, which means that would go into like the update management document. But the point is, the hackathon report is, we ran into this, we need some solution to it. Hey, TEEP, you should weigh in. Or sorry, suit, you should weigh in, so that the TEEP implementers know how to implement the suit manifest. That is the set of technical issues that we ran into at the hackathon. Otherwise, all was good. Okay.
Go ahead, Brendan.
So the suit report has an explicit solution for this. It does have an unambiguous manifest reference in it. The problem that you're encountering comes purely from taking the system property claims out of the suit report. So I'm not sure that this is the issue you think it is. I would argue, in fact, that the answer is to use a suit report.
Yep. So this isn't the discussion on the draft, so I won't respond. I'll just say my report is at the hackathon. The issue was raised, and we need to come up with something. And in your presentation, Brendan, and in the TEEP working group, we discussed this briefly, where you made the same comment. And so you might be right. The point is just I'm reporting that we had this discussion, and you can report on the answer. Thank you.
Hannes. Turn it on.
This okay. If you go back one slide, on the previous issue.
It's a formatting issue here.
Yeah, it's give me an example on how this would then actually look like in TEEP.
In TEEP or EAT, did you say?
It would obviously be the EAT in the TEEP message, but yeah.
So this is okay. So you have a TEE. The TEE boots up, and I'll use an ARM-based example, right, for my ARM colleagues here. Let's say you have TF-A version XYZ. Okay, and so you boot up, and you send off an EAT that goes off, and the EAT has multiple layers, maybe one for the trust zone hardware, right? One for the chip, right? One for one little piece of information about TF-A, piece of information about opt, and a piece of information about the TEEP agent TA. Okay, so that's what comes into your EAT, and that however you encode that into EAT, right? In that, okay, you need to specify, because now you have a piece of hardware and you have three components, right, in that chain, right? You have TF-A, you have opt, and you have the TEEP agent. And so each of those could have a suit manifest. And so as part of your token, you want to say, here was the image digest or the manifest version number or whatever, okay, for each one of those layers, and then I want to send that off to the verifier. Okay, and then it can say, oh yeah, all those things match, you're good. Okay, so how do you encode that? And that's what this is talking about, because you want to put the entire manifest into there. You want a reference to it. That's what this issue is what's the easiest, most efficient way to do that? And so here in this example, it's using the suit manifest number, not the digest. Why? Because you can look up one from the other. And so the policy on the verifier side to say, is it good or not, you would be allowed to have a policy that says suit manifest sequence number greater than or equal to 5, rather than saying digest is one of the following three things, right? The version 5 manifest, the version 6 manifest, the version 7 manifest. It's a little bit easier to deal with on the human authoring side and the lookup side, but you can get one from the other. And so that's why a suit manifest number is slightly better than a suit digest right here.
Okay, but thanks a lot. That's really helpful.
Queue is empty.
Okay, Brendan, would you come present on suit manifest 18?
All right. Oh, it's dark in here. Okay, next slide, please.
I was thinking about
So-
giving you control. You want it?
Oh, yeah, I could do that. Yeah, got it. So largely this is editorial changes. There hasn't really been much in terms of churn in the spec. Really what we've done is just made a few of these editorial changes that I've got listed here. Since, as you point out, we are short for time, I won't go through them. They are all in the GitHub, so that's relatively easy to track. Now, there is one structural change, and the structural change here is that I've added a reference to an algorithm profile document. And unfortunately, it's the if time permits document. I'm hoping that we can get past the if time permits and get to talk about it, because I think it's probably the most important thing we'll discuss today. There's also one technical change. Now, this technical change was not taken lightly. I really tried not to change the ordering of the keys in the suit manifest. However, one of our implementers was very vocal about making sure that the ordering in the CDDL was precisely matched to the ordering of the canonical CBOR encoding. And I do appreciate that concern. So what I did was to look back at exactly what requirements we had and why we would choose to order things in a particular way. And so the rationale for ordering here is that recipient necessary parameters should come before the ones that are not necessary to the recipient. And unseverable members should come before ones that are severable. So noting that I'm not aware of any unseverable recipient unnecessary metadata, with the possible exception of the canonical URI, which I have moved to the front, the first element, I would say that that third one doesn't actually exist. And the result of that is that we have unseverable before severable and recipient necessary before recipient unnecessary. And that required reordering a few of the keys. So since some of the keys were being reordered, I attempted to space out the remaining ones to allow us to hopefully grow in whichever direction is needed. So that's for the reason for the key changes. It is a breaking change, but it was really not undertaken lightly. And my big concern is that there wasn't much input on the list except from a single implementer. So I really would appreciate feedback from other implementers on this topic, but I think that if we're willing to accept the breaking ordering change, it is probably a better result in the end.
So, Brendan, my interpretation was people just want it done.
Yeah, probably.
Okay.
Fair
All
enough.
Right.
So those are the actual key changes. It's, yeah, numbers. Let's move on. So we have some open issues, and we've already heard about one of them. How do you reference a manifest in EAT? We've got a few IANA feedback elements and to-dos from the early review. So those are all relatively straightforward. None of them are breaking. None of them are cause for concern. They're just editorial. We'll get those sorted out. There are a few CDDL nits, but I hope that that's all sorted out with in short order here. And there was an error in some of the text example. This is all stuff that I think Dave already referenced in his hackathon report. But the real question there is, of course, is how do we reference a manifest in EAT? And that's not strictly a manifest question, so maybe we can just ignore that at the moment. And that's it. That's what I've got for the manifest. So I guess the question I have is, are there any other sort of working group last call type review elements that we need in here now?
This is Dave Taylor, and I agree that both of the ones that I mentioned at the end of the hackathon report can be done outside of the suit manifest document itself. As long as the CDL is fixed up to have sockets, right? Meaning the dollar signs are there, that's part of the CDL fixes. then everything else can be done in a different document, like update management, for example. So I think the suit manifest we can be done with in short order because everything is just trivial, CDDL fixes.
Excellent. Well, that's it. So unless there's any questions, we can move on.
What's the timeline for posting the fixes to the CDL? When would we get a new update suit manifest?
Early next week, I should hope.
Okay, great, thank you. Minute taker is taking that down. The minute taker is who is asking that.
Okay, multiple trust domains. This is only 2 slides, so I'm going to let you advance this one, Russ. Okay, we have a few open issues. Yeah, there's a key conflict because I reordered the numbers in the suit manifest. It hasn't had its update yet, so that's all that's going on there. After the discussion in the TEEP working group earlier today, I think that it is now clear to me that we do need an uninstall command sequence. I don't think there's any getting away from that. I think that's what it has to be. Now, because of what that is, it has to be added to the unseverable manifest members. That's all that can be done. That's where it lives. So that's going to need to be an update. But again, this is an update to the trust domain document. I think that's it. I don't believe any other commands are necessary. I think unlink on its own is good enough. The only thing that I'm concerned about here is whether 2 generations of the same manifest that both attempt to unlink a component would cause the reference count to be decremented twice. And I don't know exactly what text we should propose to prevent that situation. So that's, I don't know if there are any other open questions on this, but that is the current status of the draft.
Nope, I think that's a good summary, Brendan.
Okay. Oh, we're just flying through here. Okay, again, 2 slides. Next slide, please. Yeah, there's very little to say about this one. It's definitely not a complete list of update management actions. I'm fairly confident of that. I think this is something where we can expect the registration list to grow, and that is sort of the reason we have an IANA registry, because it won't be complete. Beyond that, I'm not sure. I have a question here about whether you should be able to use a manifest sequence number in a version comparison within a manifest. That was probably because I misinterpreted the question that Dave was asking me before and thought that he wanted a parameter in the suit parameters specifically to be able to use it in manifest sequences. Well, that appears not, in fact, to be the case. So maybe we can just strike that one. So I don't think there are any open issues as a result.
Yeah, this is Dave Taylor. I think the 2 issues that I covered at the end of the hackathon report, if there's any changes to be made, this is, one of them was the trust domains document, right? And the other one was in here. So if we agreed to do something there, then this is the document that it would be done in. So I would put it on the list of open issues there, even if Brendan would think that it might be an open issue. So.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, just until we confirm that we have consensus that your answer should be sufficient for cases, because I think we suggested that if there was a change, this is the document that would be in the context of. So one on trust domain.
Okay, fair enough. Yep, that makes sense.
Last call for questions on this one from the room, or from online. We'll get you next back up. We'll find out.
I'll talk anyway, regardless. Go ahead and go on. Yes, that's it. So the main issue with the firmware encryption draft was this instance of a practical thing from MCU boot where the flash image needs to be updated in pieces, and it kind of precludes the use of AAD. And so there's more explanation in here about effectively we have to be able to recover from a power loss during the middle of an upgrade. And it requires us to be able to do the encryption and decryption in pieces. Go ahead and go to the next slide. And go ahead, you can go ahead and go on. Oh. So this is just a summary of the issues behind that. Basically, we use AES counter mode. You can also use CBC for this. This is written into I believe it's 9 of the draft. This always requires something else to verify the integrity of the image. And what we do, so it's written that something such as a signature verification has to happen of the image. Go ahead, I think. So there was discussion during the COSA meeting to allow unauthenticated encryption. I guess depending on how that actually ends up getting worded will determine what we're allowed here. Currently, it's worded in our draft that these are only to be used for suit for this. And that should be it.
During the discussion with COSA, it's clear that we don't need the integrity provided by the AEAD because there's a signature. So allowing the blocks to be handled independently is okay as long as you validate the signature. So this external to the encryption integrity mechanism makes the system okay, but the way the instructions are written in COSA Encrypt, it says the algorithm identifier is the algorithm identifier of an AEAD. So we got to write a document that says why it's okay in this particular context, get the code points registered for AES counter, AES CBC, and then if COSA adopts it, we're done, we have an answer. If they reject it, then we have a different problem. Make sense? As far as we know, that's the only open issue with firmware encryption. Well, there's no slides. That's the end of the slides. Did you submit 2?
So there was, I added, it doesn't matter. So I added the pointer to the GitHub repo of the document, and where I
you sent 2 updates.
Yeah.
And I
clicked the wrong one. Yeah. And so the newer slide only contains pointers to the GitHub repository on 3 issues that were brought up by Marco. I think Marco is here. Yep. Actually, 2 by Marco and 1 other. I think he was. Ken proposed notice 1 other issue during the hackathon. So the 2 just to shortly summarize. Marco suggested to look into the counter signatures for the wrapper that we provide outside the encryption. So we first do the encryption, then we apply the signature. And there, if we use the counter signature mechanism, which is currently being finalized in the COSI working group, we could shave off a few bytes. So that's something we should be looking into, because it's just the signature just goes into another header parameter rather than having an entire COSI sign 1 wrapper around it, which I think has a lot of benefits. The other one was about the wording, refinement of the wording that we have in there on the use of the KEK verification, which was the mitigation to deal, thank you, which was the mitigation to deal with potential battery exhaustion. And so since we use the KEK with a nonce with all zeros, we should not, for this verification step, we should not then use a KEK for encrypting anything afterwards with the same value, because we would be reusing it. I think we need to be there explicit. Maybe obvious to many, but I think we should be crystal clear there. And on the hackathon, it's safe. Yeah. And Ken, maybe you can explain your last item. I know you created the BR and so on. Maybe you can briefly summarize on the issue that you filed for the encryption document. Sorry to put you on the spot here.
I think the suit encryption info was in the former suit manifest original core code document. The Brendan moved. I think Brendan removed from the core document of suit manifest, and now it's in the suit encryption document. And I pointed that I think it should be original position in the suit directive set parameter. I think so. That's all.
Yeah. So and what is also missing, and I think we are getting close. These issues should be resolved fairly quickly. The first one, and definitely the second one, with a little bit of rereading and looking into the counter signatures, and also what Ken just said. Probably what will be holding up is the former issue that we just talked about, which is kind of unfortunate, but it is what it is. And also there's since we are using two key exchange mechanism in here, the AES key wrap and also HBKE, we have this dependency with the HBKE document in the COSI working group. And while it's advancing, there's a continuous update or synchronization needed between those two documents with regarding to the example. And the complete example is currently not in the document, which is also something that's needed. So it kind of gets delayed because of the completion of the other work and the dependency. So that's yeah. But I think that reconfirms that it was some right decision to move that out of the main specification to advance the main manifest document faster than this extension.
Right. Brandon?
Yeah, I just had a question about the plan to register AES-CTR and whether the intent was to register that as a deprecated algorithm from the get-go.
Yeah, that's what the COSE working group chair recommended, and the point is we need a code point. And
yeah,
we'll just have to read the politics.
Yeah, I totally appreciate that. And I also see where they're coming from on that end, that you really want to avoid having a lot of people using this for non-firmware update use cases. I do wonder though if COSI is in general missing a streaming decryption capability, and that's something that they need to address.
Well, we think so. Otherwise, we wouldn't be willing to write that other document to get those code points. But the thing with streaming is you do want integrity on the chunks of the stream, and not clear how that would work just yet, and not one we're going to solve for them.
Thank you.
Suit report.
Suit reports is next, so back to Brendan.
All right, I've got 3 slides for this one.
Ooh, can you have control?
All right, so there's really not a huge change to the document this time around. Essentially what I've done is I've added a big text section that explains why and how you might choose to use a suit report as attestation evidence. Now, this has been something that I've talked about with Hank a fair bit, actually. And essentially the idea behind this is that a verifier may well be equipped to evaluate a suit report And I'm not talking about the system property claims. I'm talking about the full set of suit records. And that would allow it to reconstruct the state of the device, which gives it all the information it needs for attestation evidence. And so the idea here is that a properly constructed verifier has the ability to take a suit report and turn it into whatever other evidence it needs. It can then construct a more standard suit attestation result out of that document. And so this is essentially the idea. And there's a few justifications for why you might want to do this. One of them is that then your device can have just an append-only log of what the manifest processor did, and that becomes enough for your attestation evidence. And I think that's a really powerful thing for a very constrained node. So that's sort of the summary. I've put a block of text in which explains all of that. That's the big change. In terms of open issues, there is one issue as far as I'm concerned, and that is that we have two different logs. We've got one for debug type things and one for evidence. The one for evidence is the system property claims that Dave wants to use. And here I'm about to suggest that we get rid of it. The idea being that, that this merged log that you get at the end is better for embedded devices because they only have to append elements to a single buffer. And so that makes it really easy for them. Now, as I say here, this is a simple change, but it desperately needs feedback, especially if Teep's about to start using the part I want to delete. Then we definitely need to talk about exactly how this all fits together.
So I'm going to put myself in queue here. I don't yet have an opinion on that one. Need to think about it more. But the other issue that came up that was reported in the TEEP working group was a question. And the context is, the question that was raised there is, what's the right recommendation for how to encrypt suit reports if there happen to be any sensitive information in it? Right? And so I would just observe that the entire security considerations section of the suit reports document right now is 2 sentences, and perhaps it should say more than that.
Probably.
The only reference it has, it should either be carried over a secure transport or assigned or both, but it doesn't say what secure transport, doesn't have any considerations about encryption or whatever. So I'd say at least that's an editorial issue to be addressed, if not an actual technical issue. If it really is to say you must use, if you care about encryption, then, or sensitive information in a suit report, then either put it in a secure transport or leave it out of the report, right? Then at least that would be something. If we want to have a mechanism to do encryption at the suit report layer in the future, say you get that an extension or whatever. My point is the security consideration section should actually say something rather than not anything. So.
No, that's fair. That element of the draft is definitely lacking. So let's see if we can get that fixed for the next one.
Okay. Sounds good. Thanks.
I'd be tempted to ask you to put a threat model in there.
Karma, Brendan.
Well, I mean to say, it's just coming back to me,
Yeah, that was an inside.
For those who don't know what we're laughing about, Brendan was active in previous meetings this week about asking people to have threat models, and so.
Hey, what's a security document with no threat model? Speaking of which, here's a security document. Here's a security document. It has no threat model. If you want the threat model, you'll have to show up to the IoT Ops meeting.
At least in suit, we did do a good job of having a full threat model in the information model document. And so the manifest has a full threat model, but now that we're talking about suit reports, we can repeat the discussion.
So we can still go through tech. Okay, on to MUD, I think.
Yeah, so this is really just an update. This is a very simple extension to suit. The idea is that you have a mechanism to carry either a MUD file or both MUD URIs and MUD signer public keys. The idea behind this is that it replaces the conventional approach to deliver MUD information from a MUD capable device to a what's the word? A mud manager. So I think it's a mud manager, and it replaces that with the update pipeline. So the idea here is that your network infrastructure is supposed to receive a copy of the manifest before it gets pushed out to your device. That means that before the device ever connects to the network infrastructure already knows what its new MUD file is going to be, because it's either fetched it remotely or decoded it out of the manifest. Obviously, this is a severable element because the device itself does not need this information. It has a lot of benefits. It's similar to device certificate binding, but has the advantage that individual device certificates do not need anything about this information. Instead, all of that is delivered to the network infrastructure in a much more compact form. What this does give you is the requirement that you either do some kind of device fingerprinting or attestation in the network. Now, of course, my personal preference on this is for attestation. If you attest your manifest, then your network infrastructure should be able to determine which MUD file applies to your device and which software, and that gives you a really good combination of knowing exactly the pairs of software and MUD files that are active for any given device. It's going to be referenced by the IoT Nets document that's going tomorrow in the IoT Ops working group. I'm not aware of any open issues on this. It's literally a 3-point extension to the manifest. It does very little. It says very little. I don't know what else we need in it. Maybe a review by Elliot.
There you go. I'd like to see the suite of traditional, long worked on manifest documents done before we last call this one. Does that make
Fair
sense?
enough. Yep.
Okay.
So we'll
Just
just,
the
I think we should probably just park this one until we clear the queue out a little bit. I'm not expecting a lot of updates to it because it's so trivial.
Back pressure in our queue to make sure that the maximum queue depth on the IESG is.
Yes, we did. And the last one is MTI.
All right, this is the controversial one. You'll notice that I've got two titles here. There's 0 because I filed the wrong one before the draft deadline. Sorry about that. Then there's 01. It's got a much better structure. If you're going to read them, please read the second one.
Sorry, I didn't
So
see it yet.
there we go. So the idea behind this is that we want to ensure interoperability between devices and the systems that manage them. And we want to do this with as little M cross N problem as we can get. But this is an asymmetric problem. Devices can only be expected to implement a single crypto suite. You might get lucky and have two. That being the case, the burden really falls on authors and management systems to handle multiple crypto suites so that they can support the devices they manage. Having mandatory to implement algorithms may be problematic for some recipients. So this is going to be a challenge for us. And I think that it's I should mention, we don't do constrained to constrained, right? You don't, in suit, you don't have a situation where you have two constrained nodes that are talking to each other. You always have a relatively capable system talking to a constrained system. So this is a different problem than most of the interop problems that we run into. Recipients, if they don't have the crypto system they want available, will simply not comply with the MTIs. I think it's pretty clear that, and I've had feedback from some implementers that say, essentially, if you make an algorithm I don't want mandatory to implement, I might still use your standard, but I won't comply with the MTI. So I think that there's a danger there that if we push too hard on MTIs, we're going to end up with just non-compliant devices. I suppose that's a good reason for separating this out of the manifest draft in itself. At least then they can comply with that draft, but not with this one. So then the question is, if we're going to do mandatory to implement suites, what should we do? Well, if we do symmetric, it's relatively straightforward. We mostly know what to do with that, but the key and tag distribution is a real pain. It's not a nice way of doing things. We really don't want to advertise this as the way to solve the problem. For asymmetric, the classical implementations, at least the signature is small. Hash-based is quite large and has a stateful private key, which is not a thing to recommend it. And it may be difficult to justify in some applications, particularly if you're demanding an HSM, because I'm not aware of any that support it yet. There are other options that are coming, but they're not standardized yet. The winners are announced, but the standards haven't arrived. So no matter what we do, this is obviously a moving target. So for key distribution, which is the other side, and this will play more into the firmware encryption side of the work, there are symmetric solutions. Most of them will involve, using a single shared secret and then deriving from it. There's classical asymmetric. This is well known, might become broken. We have PQC asymmetric coming, but there are no standardized PQC asymmetric algorithms as of yet. There are winners announced. So obviously that side of things, we probably can't do in an MTI draft today. Again, this is a moving target. So what should we do? I have a proposal, and this is very much a straw man. I very much think this is going to need changes, and that I would very much welcome input on this. The proposal is that for symmetric, that one's obvious. We don't need to go into it too much. A note here just quickly that I've got AEAD written for each of the encryption algorithms. That's because those are the only currently standardized options. I'm betting that part is going to be the first one to change and end up as AES-CTR or something equivalent instead. So then the next stage of this is authentication. Well, for symmetric, again, we know what to do with that. So for classical asymmetric, I've proposed ES256. For key exchange, HPKE, which I realize is, both key exchange and encryption, but never mind. And for PQC, what I'm proposing is a hybrid mode where the authentication is HSS LMS, but the key exchange is classical HPKE. I don't think we really have a better option than that today.
So, Brendan, this is Russ. I think in light of what we've been learning in COSE, HPKE led to some confusion. What our document is a way to get with COSE structures the same properties as HPKE.
Okay.
But it is not exactly HPKE in the sense that if you took an HPKE library, you'd have to pull it all apart, the ins and outs all apart, right? And
so it's pretty close to ES256 in the end.
You just might call it COSE HPKE or something like that, right? I think that's really my only suggestion for clarity, because we already know at least one person didn't get it.
Fair enough. Yeah. So I mean, that's a good update for the draft to mention that. So there's a lot of other favorite algorithms. Some of them are definitely favorites in the IoT space. And my answer to that is there are going to be implementers who demand FIPS algorithms. We should not deny them an MTI FIPS algorithm. That would be a mistake. So I've listed 3, and they're all FIPS. The question is, do we need something else that isn't FIPS that allows, pick your favorite algorithm. I have very mixed feelings about this, as I suspect, many people do. The list will end up being very long if we keep going down this road. And so then this question is, the reasoning for the ones I've picked is that people are going to demand FIPS, and that's not an unreasonable demand. If we want to pick another one, I could see an argument for that. But I think that beyond that, it's going to start to snowball too much.
Dave Taylor, as with the TEEP protocol document editor hat on. One of the use cases of suit is, of course, in TEEP. And when doing both of them in constrained nodes, it sure would be nice if you had common requirements on what the algorithms are for the same purpose. The TEEP document says something right now, which could also be changed. And so my point is the MTIs here and the MTIs in suit, I would like them to be consistent, but I don't have a strong opinion on what they are. What the TEEP protocol document says right now, and similar constraints as Brendan said to everybody else, right? We have one side that is not constrained and the side that is constrained that happens to match exactly the constraints, the cases in suit, right? The constrained side is still the constrained side in both cases. What it says right now in the document is that the constrained node, which is the consumer of information, can pick either ES256 or EDDSA, and the unconstrained side must do both. Okay, that's what it says right now. What it should say is an interesting question. My point is we should keep alignment there, but I bring this up because you say, what about EDDSA? And TEEP would say, well, if you're going to do EDDSA and TEEP, then you probably want the same thing in suit and not two different things, right? So you can only do one library in your tiny constrained device, right? So that was my question.
So Dave, this is Dave Waltmeyer. If the goal is to keep them in alignment, how do we ensure long-term alignment between the two efforts? Are we talking about maybe having a common registry or something like that that could be shared between the efforts?
Dave, there are common registries because they're all Jose algorithms, but we don't have a required for use in TEEP, required for use in suit.
Right. Well, I guess what I was thinking is maybe a registry could define those requirements.
I was thinking that maybe what TEEP needs to do is depend on this document.
Yeah.
It does now. Funny you should mention that. That's one of the things I just posted draft 10. So the TEEP meeting was earlier today, and we walked through all the issues in TEEP as well as a couple of open issues, right? But all the issues that I said are in GitHub are now posted in draft 10, which came out this afternoon, right? It matches exactly the GitHub copy as of this morning and the end of the hackathon time. And that one does take a dependency on the firmware encryption document. You'll see that in the, right now it's an informative reference, just due to how it's worded, right? It could become normative. I think right now it's informative. But to Dave Waltermeyer's question, I wanted to give an analogy to what we do for EAT. In the RATS working group, the EAT document says you can define a profile, and it's going to use the word profile. I'm not saying we have to use the word profile or whatever. It says in use case, what's mandatory to implement is not in the body of the document, it's in the specific use case, right? So what you could say is that it's TEEP's job to specify what the mandatory to implement case is when using suit in a TEEP case. Now, the disadvantage of that is that we would love suit to say, I have a suit manifest signer and processor that can be used for both TEEP and other cases. So that's the reason to not do that. Right? And so I just want to throw out both the pros and the cons of that approach.
So the approach of leaving it to profiles is similar to what was done in TEEP with certificates. We knew certificates were going to be used in all kinds of different applications, IPsec, TLS, SMINE, so on. And so we said, picking a mandatory to implement for PPICs may not be a good choice for those. So we left it to TLS and IPsec and SMINE to pick the mandatory to implement. And that kind of feels like we're in a similar situation.
Dave here again. So I like one of the things that Brendan said earlier, which does align with how TEEP does it, which is that if you say that the non-constrained side has to implement both of them in order to let the constrained side pick one. You can do the same thing for how you do profiles, right? The non-constrained side can implement multiple profiles, and it must do all of them, right? And the constrained node supports often just a single profile because it's using it for a single use case, right? And so as long as your principle around the MTIs is to say each use case defines its MTIs, and your principle is that, say, the suit manifest generator, if it's going to have a tool or a repository for doing multiple of those, it supports a set of use cases, and it supports all the MTIs for all the use cases it wants to be used for.
But so Ross, you're implying that suit shouldn't define any MTI, and that these other use cases should.
Yes, I think that is the way out of this box.
But I think
I'm
one of
going
the
to disagree.
I was just
and
about to
say-
go there, Brendan.
and say that
'cause-
suit should define the constrained node firmware update use case, and then
Right,
leave
'cause
the
suit-
rest up.
because suit represents its own use case.
That was Brendan's point, is that he's saying, but the suit is a profile.
Mhm.
No great answer.
I think one of the things that I think you mentioned on the previous slide, which is this is a moving target. Okay, so I think that's exactly a good reason why we split out the MTI discussion out of the main document, so that as the set of MTIs change, which 10 years from now the set of MTIs is probably going to be different from what they are right now, because your point about the hopefully by then we'll have PQC standards, right, that we can actually reference that will have different MTIs, right. And so that means that the ideal case is we don't need to obsolete or even update the suit manifest document, right? We would obsolete the document with the current MTIs, not update, but actually obsolete it with a new set of MTIs.
Yep.
And so that's a good reason to separate things.
I completely agree with that.
So I'm going to say this. I have almost definitely made wrong choices in this document. This was explicitly intended to be a straw man. Please go bash it. It's almost certainly wrong, but it was the best shot at the minimum set I could think of that would suit the use cases I can see today. I'm well aware that Riot disagrees with me, and their default signature algorithm is EDDSA. And as a result, I wonder if we're going to wind up with 4 options in very short order as soon as they start editing this document with me. But that was as far as I got today, and the reasoning again was because of FIPS.
Lawrence?
Yeah, I don't know if you've looked at the latest EAT draft, but it has the definition of a profile in it, but it's not mandatory to implement. So there's a definition there, but it's not mandatory. And I don't know what you think of that as a solution.
Just repeat closer to the mic.
Oh yeah, sorry, I'm kind of short here. So the latest EAT has a definition of a profile, which includes the crypto algorithms for EAT, but it is not mandatory to implement. So it's just a definition of a profile that you can reference if you want to, and say for this kind of device, we're using this profile. So they're not mandatory to implement. They're just a palette of profiles, or the start of a palette.
Start of a palette. Okay. Hopefully you don't need a forklift when you're done. Okay. I think we really need to take this topic to the list.
Mhm.
I think that input from Riot earlier than later would be very helpful.
Yeah, I guess my question is whether the working group wants to adopt this work.
Okay, let's ask the question, does anyone have a problem adopting it in its current state, knowing that we're going to continue to work on it? Okay, we'll take that to the list too. Dave Waltermark, since you're not traveling, could you do the call for adopt?
I just want to report out in case the camera is not there. There was nobody in the room that said that they had any issues. There were no hands raised. So.
And there were no hands raised by anybody virtually.
Yeah, I'll start that.
Thank you, Dave. Given that we have just 5 minutes left, we can either go back and talk about the hackathon things that Dave skipped because we didn't think we'd get done, or we could then that.
I would find it useful if Brendan is still around to spend 2 minutes back on the 2 hackathon issues to see if we can find a way forward. Given that the actual way forward was not the point of the hackathon report. The point of the hackathon report was to say you raised an issue. All right, so if you can just go to the last 2 slides there, the first one. Let's see if we can get any direction here, right? So this one, the green part here is what the EAT spec says, right? Which anything that has its own content type, right? Your own COAP content format value that you can plug into here. And so the proposal in the hackathon was to say we create another COAP content format value, which can specify I have a way of referencing a particular suit manifest and version number. And if that's a good idea, then which draft would that go in? That's the question.
So I think I've mentioned previously that my preference in these situations is to use the digest of the manifest. I understand that you like the ability to do broad version comparisons simply, so I take that point. That other than that, I mean, this is fine. I guess my question would be, how would you feel about making the sequence number either or with the digest?
I personally would not have any objections. The question is who gets to decide the either or, because as long as say an author of a verifier can say we really like doing manifest sequence numbers or whatever, it says it gets down who gets to decide the or, right? Is really the real question.
Yeah, so who gets to decide is always the constrained node, right? It's always the same
Russ
thing.
says the minter of the each, which in this case is the device, the deep agent.
Yep.
So just speaking as an individual, I would not have any problem with that. In a constrained node, fewer options is better. And so that was the disadvantage of saying, if you say, or as long as the implementer gets to pick and only implement one of those 2 in the constrained node, then that resolves that concern.
Exactly.
So if we go forward with this, then the question is which draft does it belong in? And my personal preference would be the suit update management draft, but I'm not adamant about that.
I would have said suit report.
I would be fine with that too. But my question is, this is the suit report. Which document do we think is the right one? Is it a suit document? And if it's a suit document, which one?
You see, what I would do with this is I would embed it into the suit report, because the suit report already has those 2 elements of information in it. And so what it would do is simply aggregate the 2 of them together and call them a suit reference.
Okay.
I have a question independent of this one, more sort of logistical question or process question. When Brendan said he's going to update the manifest with the content he already had and which he talked about it, that's fantastic. Then the next step is, would that trigger in the working group last call of that document, or how would we proceed? Specifically now we have the summer months, August, some people are away and so on. So how do we make sure that we sort of like get those documents out there so we can actually use them also in
So
deep?
we're already in last call on suit manifest.
Okay.
Right.
Missed that.
And the comments is what led to the breakup, right? And
that's true.
So
yeah.
I would think that coming out of the next version, we would say, just want to confirm that all of your comments have been resolved and no new problems were introduced.
Okay, that's
A
good.
very short,
Okay.
check of it. That's my view of it.
Okay, that's good to hear.
I think that's right. I think that the principle we're trying to follow is if you raise a new comment on something that hasn't been addressed, then we will look to see, is that piece severable out of the main document into an extension so that we can keep doing that to let the rest go forward. And we hope that the answer is always, there exists no unseverable pieces. Sorry to reuse Brendan's severable coined term. We're about out of time, so I don't know if we have time to cover the last slide. So if here, no objection to putting into a suit report as you propose, as you discussed there, Brendan. So.
Excellent.
We definitely are out of time, and we'll take the second one to the list. Thank you all. I'm surprised we got through this much today. Appreciate your attentiveness.
Thanks, everyone.
I think this
Yeah, at
is,
least having Brendan live, I wanted to use the minutes we'll have.
no, I get that, because sometimes the brown group time.
Yeah.